The book, or chapter 7 of Mark, uh, I might have to just cut this one off. I'm not 100% sure how long this is going to last, but I'll try to go fast. So verses 1 through 13, and I'll read these first six. And after these first six, I'll stop and talk about it a little bit. Now the Pharisees gathered to him with some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem, and they saw some of his disciples ate with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands properly, holding to the tradition of the elders. And when they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other traditions that they observe, such as the washing of cups and pots and copper vessels and dining couches. And the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the traditions of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" And he said to them, "Well did Isaiah prophesy of you, hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me.'" The Pharisees were again concerned about being clean, but this clean was probably more focused on a ceremonial cleansing or a ritual cleansing, more than it was any type of actually being clean or pure of heart. They were not worried with being purified as much as they were with the outward appearance of being purified. They were concerned with their actions that other people could see them doing, and those other people could assume that they were pure. And Jesus' disciples did not wash in the way that the Jewish customs had said. Mark actually writes that there were several ceremonial washings the Pharisees focused on, as you saw there, even washing cups, pots, vessels, couches, all these things that were being focused on. And it would seem that the Pharisees were asking out of concern. I'm sorry, let me back up. It would seem that the Pharisees were not asking Jesus this question because they were concerned about his disciples. Instead, it seems if you look closely at the question, um, they were more targeting Jesus because of this and not really being concerned with the disciples being pure or purified, because they said, "Why do your disciples?" See, the Pharisees had their own subtle way of taking a shot at Jesus by pointing out that his followers were not taught correctly the Hebrew customs. And so they were telling Jesus and everyone around who could hear the question, they were saying, "Look, your disciples, you haven't even taught them the simple things like washing of hands before they eat." Um, they were trying to imply that, or without saying, they were implying, okay, who dropped the ball when they were supposed to be teaching these disciples, and that would have been Jesus. And they asked why they don't walk in the way. And see, the Pharisees, they missed the point of the heart being clean. They were overly focused on doing the small, unimportant things right, but they neglected to take care of the big things that people couldn't see. Um, they were very focused on the things that everyone else could see. But as far as having their heart right, which was only going to be between them and God, they were less concerned with. They neglected to take care of those things. And Jesus, of course, went right to the heart of the problem. Um, they said and did extraordinary amounts of work to show everyone just how holy they were, but they failed to do the things to prepare their hearts before they got around others. So going into their closets and praying with God before they go into the marketplace, before they go and dine with others, they weren't doing any of that. They weren't doing those things that would um, prepare them to go into the world so that they could be a shining light for Jesus. So let's keep going here in these verses. He says, "In vain do they worship me." He's quoting Isaiah here, "teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. You leave the commandment of God and hold to the traditions of men." And he said to them, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and whoever reviles his father or mother must surely die. But you say, 'If a man tells his father or his mother, whatever you have gained from me is Corban, that is given to God, then you no longer permit him to do anything for his father or mother, thus making void the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and many such things you do. Jesus said their worship was in vain, useless. It was pointless. Their worship was worthless because they traded the law of God for their society's norms. They were teaching the commands that men had made and treating those commands that men had made with the same amount of weight to the commands that God had given them. And it's important for us to realize our traditions do not equal, much less overrule God's commands. And the Pharisees had a big problem of doing what was best for the synagogues and themselves over the commands of God. See, he even mentions here, Jesus says, instead of these guys following the fifth commandment, honoring their father and mother, they were allowing people to not take care of their parents in order to devote that money to God. Now, we saw earlier in Mark that the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. In the same line of thinking, our resources are to take care of other people more than buildings or institutions like synagogues or churches, even. We're supposed to take care of people. Um, our parents and our family are our responsibility to take care of. We don't allow our parents to suffer so that we can give more to the church. Because I imagine what has been happening here is you would have someone go to their mother and father, like Jesus is referencing, and saying, whatever you would have gained from me is Corban. I'm going to give it to God. They were doing that so that once they got to the synagogue, everyone around would look at them and brag on them and think highly of them, saying, there's a person who is willing to sacrifice his family so that he could give even more to God. Um, and Jesus said the Pharisees were allowing this, and they were doing more than this. And we must be sure that we don't let our worship of God lose its power because we neglect to serve the people around us. We are called to love God and serve people. We're not called to neglect people to appear to other people to be serving God more. And he continues on in the next set of verses, answering the question of what defiles a person, verses 14 through 23. And he called the people to him again and said to them, hear me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going into him can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile him. And when he entered the house and left the people, his disciples asked him about the parable, and he said to them, then are you also without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into a person from the outside cannot defile him, since it has not entered his heart but his stomach, and is expelled? He thus declared all foods clean. And then he said, what comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All of these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. The things we eat do not corrupt us. The corruption is already there. Inside of each of us is a seed that has an enormous potential to do great evil. The worst sins, the worst crimes that you can imagine, they're inside of us, and they have the ability to come out. Think of the worst thing that you've ever seen or you've ever heard, um, and know that deep inside of each of us, there is the capability to do something just as bad. It only takes the right circumstance or situation or sequence of events to bring that out in us. And Jesus and the Holy Spirit helps us from following through with those evil things. But the capacity for those horrible sins, they're still there. They're still in us. Our hearts expose us for who we are when we're responding to something without thinking. When we are just reacting to events or situations or circumstances, when we don't have time to think about a response, we just act on our impulse. Those impulses reveal to us what's on the inside of our heart. When we act out on these, and we fail, we do some evil deed by our responses, we're defiled. When we let the evil out of our heart move us, we are exposed. It shows what is inside of us. Um, and that's why it's so important to focus on Jesus and to allow the Holy Spirit to overtake us and to teach us um, the proper way to love God and to love others, so that when we are put in a pressure situation, that our reaction to that, instead of being an evil reaction, is a godly reaction. And Our next set of verses is the Syrophoenician woman's faith. These are verses 24 through 30. And from there, he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he said to her, "For this statement you may go your way. The demon has left your daughter." And she went home and found the child lying in bed and the demon gone. This is a tough passage. You have a lot of Jesus goes and tries to hide, but the same way that the sun can't be hidden by a basket, uh, the Son, S-O-N, Jesus, can't be hidden wherever he is. His wonder and his power cannot be concealed. People found him. Notice he does not go to a synagogue. He's going to homes now. He's going to private houses. Um, and even though he's trying to be hidden, he was there in this region close to the Gentiles to give a glimpse of power among the Gentiles. And that's why it's important that this Syrophoenician is there. Um, and she comes begging for her daughter. And his response to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to dogs." That seems very harsh, even cold-hearted to a sense. It seems like it even has a touch of racism, because what he's saying there is, I'm here to feed the Jewish people. I'm not here to worry about all the other people, the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, and even goes as far to compare them to feeding children of God versus the pets of God, the animals, the domesticated animals around God. And even though it seems harsh at first, I want you to think about it this way: Jesus always pushed and tried the faith and humility of people. I think about the rich young ruler. When the rich young ruler comes to Jesus, Jesus doesn't tell him how great he's doing. Instead, he tells him the one thing he doesn't want to hear. He tells the rich young ruler, "Go and sell all you have and give it to the poor, then come follow me." And here we have this lady, and see, Jesus doesn't. He does not answer with easy, feel good answers. He answers people with hard answers, and those who stayed were proven true. Those who stay were shown to be loyal, trustworthy servants of Jesus, and those who left did not pass the test. And I imagine that Jesus knew the struggles and the strengths of this woman. He knew how she felt deep inside about the animosity between Jews and Gentiles. Now, I don't know this. I don't know how she felt. Perhaps she was extremely bitter about the treatment that she had received from the Jews, and maybe she hated the Jews in return. And so Jesus called her from that with this statement. Or maybe she had such extraordinary humility that Jesus knew she could be a lesson for all those who heard her to think less about themselves and more of others. Either way, And maybe there's another way that she felt about it before now. She answered the question marvelously. She acknowledged her lack of ability and how much she didn't deserve anything from Jesus. And I think that's how we need to approach Jesus, with a spirit of humility, recognizing that there is nothing that I can do to earn anything or to reward myself, not a thing that I can do or be done. And it's only through Him. And when we come to Him, um, to recognize we don't deserve anything He gives us is a gift. And she also, it's also interesting here, she points out that just a tiny crumb of Jesus is all she needs. She doesn't need a huge amount of Jesus, just a little bit. And it reminds me of all the times we've seen in the book of Mark where people just come and they touch his robe, or they try to get close to him, or just get him to speak over them. And all these things we see, as she says, I just need a crumb. If I can just get a crumb from you, Jesus, that would be enough. And she realized that he, in her life, in any amount, was everything that she needed. And I think we would do well to learn from her. We would do well to recognize that we just need Jesus. In any amount we can get him, we need more of him and less of us. In our last uh, group of verses today, Jesus heals a deaf man. Mark 7:31 through 37. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment. And they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue, and looking up to heaven, sighed, and said to him, Ephatha, that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, his tongue was released, he spoke plainly, and Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. The Decapolis, just a reminder, this is the same region that Jesus had cast out the legion of demons. And he also, remember, he left that man there and told him to go and tell his friends and families what God had done for him. And it seems like that man that Jesus left there had been doing exactly that, because when Jesus shows up at the Decapolis this time, instead of all the people being terrified of him and asking him to leave, instead they're bringing him people. They're bringing him people that he can show his power and do his miraculous signs with again. And this poor man was in bad shape. Um, Not only could he not hear, so he could not hear what other people were saying, which is bad enough, but he couldn't speak himself. He couldn't reveal what he was thinking to anyone because he couldn't get the words out. And so he was shut off from the world, and he was also trapped inside of himself, unable to communicate with the world, unable to have that relationship that most people have in the form that we're talking now, where I speak and you guys listen. And then when we flip this around, where you guys are going to speak and I'm going to listen, this man couldn't do any of that. He had no way to explain himself. He had no way to tell what was on his mind. In a sense, he was trapped in his own body. And I just thank Jesus that he has allowed us to hear and speak his word. And I hope that we never take it for granted, and that it, because we recognize it's such a gift from him, that we never stop telling people and speaking about his truth. Now, Jesus used a very unusual method for healing this man. Um, but understand, this was not some magical sequence of events to where if we go and copy these exactly as it's written here, that we can heal deaf and mute people. It, I believe, is a visual expression of what was happening. Um, this man who could not hear, could not speak, but he could see that Jesus was doing something. He could see the actions of Jesus and to know that things were happening. And even through all of this, you see that Jesus, um, the man could see his hands, his fingers, he spit, and then Jesus sighed real big, and he only spoke one word. And I'm guessing the man's first word that he heard was opened. And what's awesome about this story is at the end of it, we see that no one could speak badly of a man who is healing the deaf and mute. There was nothing to gain. Jesus wasn't going to gain any kind of riches from healing these people, but it would only silence people more. And more who tried to find fault with Jesus would have to be silenced and have to work harder to find something to be upset with Jesus about. The proof of Jesus' heart condition was actions pouring out of him into the lives of everyone around him. And our actions prove the condition of our hearts as well. We need to consider them, and when we consider our actions, we can get a very accurate reading and a very accurate gauge on what is the condition of my heart.